The latest on President Trump's efforts to end Russia's war in Ukraine. Is Gavin Newsom leading Democrats off a cliff with his gerrymandering nuclear option? And we have a special summer story for you on the Great American Road Trip and the role of electric vehicles. And lastly, Zohran, the bodybuilder, and some great video content he created for the internet. All of that and so much more today on 10 Minute Drill.
Everybody get up, get up.
The story of America is the story of an adventure.
I can hear you. The rest of the world hears you.
We are a nation under God, and I believe God intended for us to be free.
Yesterday, President Trump took questions in the Oval Office, and the latest on his negotiations to try and set up a meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy came up.
Every conversation I have with him is a good conversation, and then unfortunately a bomb is loaded up into Kiev or someplace, and then I get very angry about it.
This follows Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov telling American media that there is currently no meeting set between President Trump, President Putin, and President Zelenskyy.
There is no meeting planned. Putin is ready to meet with Zelenskyy.
Now, it's important to note that Lavrov is known for playing political games. Here's a picture of him showing up in Alaska with a t-shirt that is paying direct tribute to the Soviet Union and their history. Wearing that shirt was interpreted as a suggestion that Lavrov and parts of Putin's own government still see Ukraine as a part of the Soviet Union that they would like to reassemble. JD Vance also went on TV on Sunday and talked about Russia's willingness to make certain concessions.
I think the Russians have made significant concessions to President Trump for the first time in 3.5 years of this conflict.
Now, we don't know what those concessions that Russia is willing to offer are, but we do know a number of Russia's very specific demands. No European troops will be in Ukraine. They still want territory that they haven't been able to win on the battlefield. And Ukraine will not be allowed to join NATO. One concession that we do know that Russia has been willing to make is they have said if Ukraine agrees to all of these terms, they won't invade any other countries. Now, if history is any indication, no one should trust that at all. But Putin is playing some attempted, very ham-fisted mind games with the Trump administration. For example, in Alaska, he brought up mail-in voting. He brought up the media reports about irregularities in the 2020 election in an attempt to get President Trump on his side. But President Trump has gotten more and more vocally frustrated with Putin's unwillingness to actually come to the peace table. So we'll see if this latest flap with Lavrov or their continued intransigence on actual concessions drives President Trump towards the maximum sanctions that they have discussed. We talked last week about a bombshell report in the New York Times highlighting Democrats' current voter registration crisis. Here's ABC News on that from Sunday.
This is just a stunning analysis that the New York Times has out in the last couple of days. You've seen nationwide a drop in Democratic registration numbers.
Extraordinary that Democrats have lost more than 2 million registered voters just in the past 4 years, and Republicans have gained.
This New York Times data shines a light on a trend that we've been talking about in polling all year long, which is that every poll in America is finding Democrats at their lowest approval rating in history. And every time we talk about this, we highlight reasons why. For example, last week, we talked about how in Northern Virginia, Democrats were fighting to allow biological men into women's bathrooms to share bathrooms with young girls, even after multiple instances of convicted sex criminals being found in women's bathrooms in Virginia schools. Our example for today is in California. Newsom doesn't want to fund California's new tough on crime law. Who should? You'll remember that back in November, California overwhelmingly passed a ballot initiative to make crime in California illegal again. As crazy as that sounds, before Prop 36 passed, there was laws in California that allowed criminals to get away with a misdemeanor for stealing from stores up to $950. Gavin Newsom fought against Prop 36 tooth and nail, and now that it has passed by 70% of the vote, he's refusing to fund it. The funding for that would cost about $250 million. Now, Gavin wants to spend that $250 million instead on his gerrymandering nuclear option, which we have talked about already is deeply unpopular in the state because it gets rid of their popular independent redistricting commission. Now, again, if you're a California resident who voted to make crime illegal again, and you see that your governor is not wanting to fund the police and the law enforcement services needed to make crime illegal again, but instead wants to take that money and fund his vanity project, presidential aspiration-driven gerrymandering nuclear option, I imagine you're more than a little bit frustrated. And when this came back up, for example, just last week, Bed Bath & Beyond announced they wouldn't be reopening stores in California, Gavin Newsom mocked them. After their bankruptcy and closure of every store, like most Americans, we thought Bed Bath & Beyond no longer existed. We wish them well in their efforts to become relevant again as they try to open a second store. Now, this is the Gavin Newsom press office account, which has been widely mocked for getting everything wrong on policy and on tone. And in this case, they're mocking Bed Bath & Beyond for their stores closing, ignoring the fact that most of the stores in California closed because they were looted because Gavin Newsom's soft on crime policies allowed that to happen. Meanwhile, other blue state governors, seeing all the attention that Gavin Newsom is getting, are thinking about copying him in their own states.
Are you considering trying to redraw lines in Maryland?
Yeah, when I say all options are on the table, all options are on the table.
Are you actively looking at it now?
Yeah.
That was Maryland Governor Wes Moore. Now, the problem that Democrats face is one that we've talked about quite a bit here. Democrats are so many years ahead in gerrymandering that most of their states already are without a single Republican representative for them to attempt to gerrymander out. ABC covered this trend.
And if you look at the other states that might still do redistricting this year, bottom line, it is advantage GOP.
The Daily Caller covered this last week. Gavin Newsom is leading Democrats down a path of destruction. The reality is Democrats don't have a lot of room left to go here. And if they follow Gavin Newsom off this cliff, it's going to create more Republican seats and a much stronger Republican majority. And it's important to remember that Gavin Newsom is doing this as an audition for his 2028 presidential campaign. But if other Democrats follow his lead, they'll be falling off a ditch in a way that only hurts their party and makes our country far more polarized. One theme that we've talked about quite a bit on 10-Minute Drill is uncovering all the different ways Democrats have found to divert our tax dollars to their political ambitions. Well, the group Defending Education has a new report that just came out on Sunday highlighting another way this has been done. Nation's two largest teachers unions funneled nearly $50 million to left-wing groups, Watchdog Report says. Here's Defending Education's Ryan Staley describing this report.
They took this money and they basically indirect taxes from their teachers and they funneled them into their pet projects and their allies on the left. Groups like Arabella Advisors and the Trevor Project even.
Defending Education President Nikki Neely also added this. Rather than focusing on classrooms and students, teachers' unions are funneling tens of millions in dues to far-left causes, PACs, and activist groups. Parents and taxpayers deserve schools that educate, not political machines. The bottom line here is taxpayers pay teachers' salaries. The teachers' unions collect dues from those teachers' salaries and are giving them to things like Move On and other political organizations that are then carrying out Democrat political activities. For example, Move On was organizing a lot of the protests early on against President Trump and Doge and their efforts to make the Department of Education and public education work better. So that is what our tax dollars in a roundabout way are funding. This is a great report from Defending Education. I encourage you to read more about it. Over the weekend, the Wall Street Journal had an interesting story about the role of electric vehicles and the, quote, Great American Road Trip. I drove an EV deep into the wilderness. I never feared running out of juice. Now, let me preface by saying that we are not against electric vehicles here on the 10-Minute Drill, but we do think it's important to have a reality check. And Mr. Mims went very far in describing not just that EV road trips are doable, but at one point he said they are better than gas-powered road trips. Let's look at what he wrote. Something surprising is happening. Despite Trump admin's rollbacks of incentives for EVs and related tech, America's fast-charging infrastructure is exploding. We'll see a 3x increase in chargers in just the next 4 years. I hit the road to experience it firsthand. The other thing they don't tell you, EV road trips can be better than gas because fast chargers are now in places you'd want to stop anyway, with decent food and good bathrooms. Now, we examined what Mr. Mims experienced here. Now, first, let me preface this by saying He stayed in the state of California, which has probably the most chargers of any state in the country, but he still found that there were certain parts where it was difficult to find a charging station. But beyond just the issue with charging station availability is range. One thing that he detailed was the number of stops he had to make. To go about 1,600 miles all within the state of California, he had to stop 10 times. These were not your simple gas station pit stops where you can fill up, grab a candy bar and a water bottle and get back out on the road in 10 minutes or less. These are stops that average almost an hour. One stop was as long as 200 minutes. That is over 3 hours long. It took him as long to fill up his EV at a simple stop as it would take to watch the entire movie of Titanic. My family went on a road trip just a couple weeks ago, and we began in Salt Lake City, Utah, drove up to Logan, Utah for a funeral, and then headed up into the Bighorn Basin of Wyoming. In total, we drove about 1,100 miles, and we were able to plan stops around things like letting our children get out, run around, exercise, pit stops to go to the bathroom, and meals. And we were able to be more efficient because we were in a rented Ford Expedition with a 450-mile range. So again, we're not against electric vehicles. I think that they are making incredible advancements. But if you're going to write electric vehicles are better for a great American road trip than a gas-powered car, first, you got to take it outside of California where there's EV charging stations every block. You got to try it with small kids. If my very cute, wonderful small kids had to stop every hour and a half 10 times over a 2-day drive, as parents, we would lose our absolute minds. I think this development is continuing to advance, and I think EV batteries are probably the next place where we're going to see major developments, including adding to the charging infrastructure. But again, don't tell us something is better if we know it's not. I have to beg your forgiveness for a little bit of an analogy here. Now, I know the Harry Potter books have been kicked to death by the left because everyone thinks they're Harry Potter and Donald Trump is Voldemort, things like that. But on a very different tack today. In the beginning of the Harry Potter books, every dark wizard who had helped Lord Voldemort came back to the fold and said, "We were bewitched. They made us do it. They forced us to do all the bad things we did." And then when Voldemort came back in the 4th book, all the dark wizards went back to him as if nothing had ever happened. Very similarly, we are seeing a trend where woke corporations are saying they only did woke things because, the Biden administration or left-wing governments made them do it. For example, JP Morgan Chase and big banks are saying we only debanked conservatives and took away banking access for religious liberty groups, gun manufacturers, and things like that because Biden and Obama made us do it. Now, we all can agree Biden and Obama did a lot of terrible things, and they likely did pressure a lot of banks to do this, but do we really believe that the masterminds behind the ESG and net zero push, who have been very open about their politics, despising President Trump, despising gun manufacturers, needed regulators to push them to do it? We're seeing a very similar thing with corporations and their now illegal DEI departments. They are putting up passwords and trying to hide their DEI until a Democrat is back in office and gives them the opportunity to bring all of their woke political agendas right back out where they left them. Will Hilt had a fantastic op-ed today in the Washington Examiner. Trump kills bank's excuse for political discrimination. For years, big banks have been lying about debanking conservative customers for political reasons. They tried to hide behind, quote, regulatory pressure, unquote, when explaining why they closed accounts or denied services. But President Donald Trump's August 7th executive order put that excuse to rest. With it, the dubious and widely abused reputational risk standard has been torn from the bank's playbook, as it is thankfully no longer recognized by the federal government. So as you hear these corporations try and say either, the Democrats made us do it, or we've put this away, remember, they did it before. They will do it again as soon as a Democrat is back in office. And so you have to be wary as people make these changes just how deep that commitment appears to be. One of my favorite topics, the first 8 months of this year, and as part of the Democrat brand crisis, has been the topic of masculinity. Now, Democrats have acknowledged the fact that they are losing male voters at record speed. To try and combat that, they have tried to do all sorts of masculine things. We, of course, remember masculine hero Tim Walz and his efforts to hold a gun. And of course, they're incredibly masculine TikTok influencers.
So I shot a gun for the first time today, and I've always been told by Republicans that after the first time, I'll be in favor of guns and I'll want more guns. But for me, it was the exact opposite.
The latest amazing example of this came over the weekend in New York City when mayoral candidate Zohran Mamdani was asked to lay down and attempt to bench press.
Let's go, let's go, let's go, let's go, let's go. Yeah! Let me get one more. Let me get 3.
Now you'll note that that is 135 pounds, one plate, which is pretty much the beginner weight for most small children when they begin weightlifting. It also is the same amount of weight that Eric Swalwell posted a video of attempting to lift himself.
I should be working right now. I should be at the Capitol.
But to make it even more embarrassing for Zohran, here's Riley Gaines. Bottom line here, Democrats do not look to have a solution to their problem with men and masculinity coming up in the near future. That is all the time we have for today. Thank you so much for joining us on 10 Minute Drill. Please like, subscribe, tell your friends, leave us a review on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, anywhere else. Thanks so much for joining us.